Millionaire thought he was wedding an ugly woman in arranged marriage, but he was stunned when he married her for convenience, not love. The world mocked her. He ignored her until one quiet moment shattered everything he believed about beauty pride and what it truly means to love someone. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another emotional love story like this one. Now let's begin. The winter sky over Port Orford, Oregon looked like brushed steel, cold, unfeeling, perfect for a wedding no one wanted. Inside the seaside chapel, strings of white lilies lined the pews, but even their scent couldn't hide the tension that hung in the air. Guests whispered behind champagne flutes, pretending to admire the view of the Pacific through the glass walls. In truth, they were gossiping about the bride. She's the shipbuilder's daughter, right? The bankrupt one, poor girl. Even the dress can't save her. At the altar stood Nathan Cole, 35, founder of one of the largest real estate firms on the West Coast. His black suit fit him like armor, his jaw tight as if he were enduring a business meeting rather than a wedding. He didn't look at his bride. He didn't have to. He already knew what people were saying, that she was plain, that he could have had anyone. Across the aisle, Lena Hart walked slowly toward him, her steps quiet against the marble floor. Her dress wasn't designer. It was simple satin, hand-altered by a friend from her small coastal town. Her veil softened her face, but the crowd could still see the modest features they'd decided weren't beautiful enough for a man like Nathan. She heard their whispers. She just kept walking. Nathan's attorney sat in the front row, a leather folder on his lap. Inside was the contract that had brought them here, an arranged marriage that would last 1 year. No romance, no promise of forever, just a deal. Nathan needed stability after rumors about his company's ethics. Lena needed to pay for her father's heart surgery before winter ended. 2 signatures, 1 cold agreement. The officiant's voice echoed through the glass hall. "Do you, Nathan Cole, take this woman?" Nathan's answer came, clipped, controlled. "I do." Then it was her turn. Lena's hands trembled, but her voice carried. "I do." It wasn't a declaration of love. It was survival. Applause broke out, polite but hollow. Nathan offered his arm for the photographs, his smile professional like closing a corporate deal. Lena stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the ocean outside. The waves crashed hard against the rocks, wild and free. Everything this marriage was not. When the ceremony ended, Nathan leaned closer, his tone polite but distant. "You'll move into my estate tomorrow. My assistant will handle the details." Lena nodded. Of course. No emotion, no eye contact. Just 2 people caught in a transaction that neither believed in. Outside, reporters waited, their cameras flashing. Nathan kept his expression unreadable, shielding her from the light, not out of care, but out of habit. To the world, appearances mattered more than truth. But as they stepped into the car, a single thought flickered in Nathan's mind, an unfamiliar curiosity he quickly dismissed. There had been something steady, almost brave, in the way she looked back at the crowd. He told himself it didn't matter. For him, this was a contract, 1 year of endurance, a temporary inconvenience. For her, it was something else entirely, a promise made out of sacrifice, a leap into an unknown life. As the car drove away along the cliffside, the waves below roared against the rocks as if the ocean itself knew the storm that was coming. The next morning, the Oregon coast was wrapped in fog. A black car wound its way along the cliffs toward Coal Point Estate, Nathan's private mansion that overlooked the restless Pacific. Lena sat in the back seat, hands folded neatly in her lap, watching the ocean blur past her window. She had never seen a house like his before, glass and stone rising from the rock like something out of a magazine. It was beautiful, but in the same way, winter is beautiful, distant, untouchable. Nathan was waiting on the front steps when she arrived. His suit was pressed, his posture perfect. He looked like he belonged in a world that never allowed mistakes. "Welcome," he said, his voice polite but measured. "I'll have the staff show you to your room." He paused as if remembering something. "We should make a few things clear." Lena set down her small suitcase. "Of course. This isn't a real marriage," he said, hands in his pockets. "You'll have everything you need, but you'll stay out of my way. We'll appear together at public events when necessary, and in 1 year, this arrangement ends. No obligations beyond that." His tone was calm, but each word landed like a stone. Lena nodded once, understood. She didn't argue. She couldn't afford to. The maid led her down the east hallway, where the sound of waves echoed through the walls. Her room was large, bigger than her father's entire house, but it felt cold, like a hotel no one really lived in. When the door closed, silence filled the space. Lena opened the curtains. Below, the cliffs dropped straight into the sea. The wind howled, tossing white spray against the rocks. Somewhere far beneath the surface, she imagined her father's voice. "Hold steady, kid. You've survived storms before." That evening, they ate dinner in the formal dining room. The table could have seated 20, but only 2 places were set. Nathan read emails on his tablet while she quietly ate soup she couldn't taste. She tried to start a conversation, something simple. "The view here is incredible." He didn't look up. "I suppose it is." Silence again, the kind that hums between 2 people who don't know how to fill it. After dinner, Lena wandered the halls. Every surface gleamed marble floors, silver frames, paintings of oceans and skylines. But nowhere was there a sign of life. No warmth, no color, no music. Later that night in her room, she unpacked a small leather sketchbook from her bag. The edges were worn, the pages filled with pencil drawings. Her father repairing a boat, the dock at sunset, her mother's hands before she passed. She sat by the window and began to draw the mansion, its tall windows reflecting the stormy sea. As her pencil moved, the house looked less like a home and more like a cage of glass. Down the hall, Nathan poured himself a glass of bourbon and stared at the fire. His day had been filled with meetings, numbers, and noise, everything predictable. But his mind kept drifting to the quiet woman now living under his roof. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the look in her eyes at the wedding, steady, not desperate. Maybe it was the way she hadn't asked for anything, not even kindness. Nathan shook off the thought and turned back to his laptop. To him, this was a year of obligation, nothing more. But outside, the sea kept crashing against the rocks, steady, patient, unstoppable, as if it already knew what neither of them did, that something small had begun to shift. A week after the wedding, Nathan and Lena appeared together in public for the first time. It was a charity gala in Portland, the kind of event where wealth glimmered under chandeliers and everyone smiled with polite sharpness. As they entered the ballroom, the crowd's reaction was immediate, eyes lingering, lips whispering. Nathan's hand rested lightly on Lena's back, more out of formality than affection. She wore a navy blue gown that she had altered herself. Elegant, but modest. Compared to the sequined dresses around her, she looked out of place, quiet, understated. That's her, the shipbuilder's daughter. He could have married anyone in the city. Money must not buy taste. Lena heard the words even when they were disguised as laughter. She straightened her shoulders and smiled, pretending not to notice. Nathan said nothing. He was busy greeting investors, shaking hands, and playing the part of the charming host. Still from across the room, he caught sight of her now, and then the way she stood perfectly still, her hands clasped her face, calm, despite the storm of whispers. Something about her composure unsettled him. Most people would have crumbled under that kind of scrutiny. She didn't. When the band started playing, Nathan joined a conversation near the bar. His friend Richard leaned in with a smirk. "Cole, you always surprise me. Thought you picked someone a little more photogenic." Nathan's jaw tightened. "It's not about that," he said, though. Even he wasn't sure what he meant. Across the ballroom, Lena excused herself and slipped onto the balcony. The cold air was a relief after hours of smiling. Below, the city lights reflected on the river, shimmering like distant stars. For a moment, she let her shoulders drop, her breath visible in the night. Inside, she could hear laughter, that sharp, glittering kind that didn't reach the heart. She missed the sound of waves. She missed the smell of salt and wood from her father's workshop. She stayed there until Nathan found her. "You disappeared," he said quietly. She turned to face him. It was getting a little crowded. He looked at her. Really looked, maybe for the first time that night. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, her eyes steady and tired. There was something genuine about her stillness, something that made the noisy world behind them feel smaller. He wanted to say something kind, but habit won. "Next time, try to stay close. People notice when you walk off." Lena nodded. Of course. She didn't argue. She never did. Back at the mansion later that night, the silence between them felt heavier than before. The sound of the waves outside filled the spaces where words should have been. Downstairs, the staff whispered while clearing the dishes from the evening. "She's trying," one maid said softly. "You can see it." "Doesn't matter," another replied. "He doesn't even look at her." Lena passed them quietly in the hallway, pretending she hadn't heard. She'd learned long ago that dignity wasn't about silence. It was about what you refused to let break you. In her room, she opened her sketchbook and drew the ballroom, the lights, the gowns, the crowd with their turned shoulders. But in her version, the balcony was the brightest part, a small space of calm in a room full of noise. When she closed the book, she whispered to herself, "Just 1 year." In his office, down the hall, Nathan loosened his tie and stared at the rain streaking down the window. For reasons he didn't understand, the image of her standing on that balcony lingered in his mind, a quiet figure against the glitter of everything he thought he wanted. He poured himself a drink, but it didn't help. He told himself again that this was temporary, that he owed her nothing more than a contract. Yet deep inside, a small part of him wondered what would happen if he stopped pretending not to see her. Outside, the waves crashed harder against the rocks as if echoing a question neither of them was ready to ask. The storms rolled in from the Pacific without warning. By late afternoon, the wind howled through the cliffs and rain slammed against the wide glass windows of Coal Point Estate like 1,000 tiny fists. Nathan was working in his office when the power flickered. He looked up just in time to see a figure outside on the terrace, small, fragile, standing in the pouring rain. It was Lena. Without a coat, without an umbrella, she stood facing the sea, as if the storm were her only friend. The rain drenched her hair, plastering it against her face, but she didn't move. Nathan hesitated. His first thought was irritation. What on earth is she doing out there? But then something else tugged at him, something quieter. Concern. He walked outside. The cold air hit him instantly, the rain soaking through his shirt as he stepped onto the terrace. "Lena," he called over the wind. "You'll catch a cold." She turned slightly, her voice soft but steady. "I'm fine." "You shouldn't be out here," he insisted. She looked back at the waves. "It's the only place that doesn't judge me." The words caught him off guard. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain fell heavier, yet it felt like the world had gone still. Nathan finally stepped closer. The ocean roared below them, gray and endless. "People talk," he said quietly. "They always will." Lena's eyes lifted to meet his. "Yes, but out here the ocean doesn't care who's rich or who's ugly. It just keeps moving." He didn't know what to say to that. He'd spent his entire life caring about how things looked, the deals, the headlines, the image. Standing beside her, now soaked and speechless, he felt something unfamiliar, the quiet weight of humility. They stood there for several minutes, not talking, just breathing in the storm. The sound of rain filled the silence between them, washing away the edges of distance. When lightning flashed over the horizon, Nathan finally spoke. "Let's go inside." Lena hesitated, then nodded. Together, they walked back into the house, dripping water across the marble floor. The maid gasped softly when she saw them, the millionaire and his wife soaked like two kids caught in the rain. Nathan handed Lena a towel. "Next time you need fresh air, maybe try the balcony," he said, his tone half teasing, half gentle. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "I'll keep that in mind." For the first time since the wedding, he saw her smile, not the polite one she gave to strangers, but something real, something unguarded. That night, when Nathan lay awake, listening to the storm fade, he found himself replaying that moment on the terrace, the rain, the silence, her voice against the sea. He didn't realize it yet, but something had shifted. The rain had washed more than the salt from the air. It had begun to wash away the distance between them. The rain had passed, but something inside Coal Point Estate had changed with it. In the days that followed, Nathan found himself noticing things he hadn't before. The way Lena tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, how she hummed softly while sketching near the window, how calm she seemed, even when the world outside their walls was all noise and judgment. It unsettled him. He told himself to focus on work, but her presence lingered in his mind like the echo of a song he didn't know he liked yet. One evening, he returned home earlier than usual. The sun was setting, painting streaks of orange across the glass walls. He walked past the library and stopped. There she was, again sitting at the oak desk with her sketchbook open. She didn't notice him at first. Her pencil moved quickly, gracefully, bringing something to life on the page. Curiosity got the better of him. He stepped closer. "What are you drawing?" he asked. Startled, she turned. The pencil slipped from her fingers. "It's nothing," she said quickly, closing the book. He frowned. "You always say that." "It's true." "Then show me." Her hands tightened around the book. "No." Nathan folded his arms. "I think I have a right to see what my wife is doing in my house." The words came out colder than he intended, but pride didn't let him take them back. Lena's eyes lifted to his steady and unflinching. "Your house," she repeated quietly. "Right," he sighed. "Don't twist my words." "I don't have to," she said softly. "They twist themselves. Silence fell between them, heavy as the tide outside. Finally, she opened the sketchbook and slid it toward him. "Go ahead," she whispered. Nathan looked down and froze. The first page was a portrait of the sea, wild and gray, yet somehow full of light. The next was of the mansion, but not as it appeared in reality. In her drawing, it looked lonely, almost grieving. Then came a series of faces, the staff, the gardener, even the housekeeper, each one captured with warmth and humanity. And then he turned the page again. Him. She had drawn him sitting in his office, eyes focused but tired, the faintest crease between his brows. It wasn't a flattering portrait, it was real. Too real. He swallowed hard. "Why would you draw me like this?" She hesitated, "Because it's how you look when you think no one's watching." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't." "Shouldn't what?" She interrupted, her voice rising for the first time. "See you. You built walls so high around yourself you can't even see what's real anymore." He stared at her, stunned. She never raised her voice, not once since the day they met. She stood trembling but firm. "You think I wanted this, Nathan. You think I dreamed of being part of your perfect facade. I traded my freedom for my father's life. That's the only reason I'm here." Her voice broke, but she didn't look away. "For you, this marriage is an inconvenience. For me, it's survival. So please don't talk to me about rights or houses or appearances. You have everything. I have this." She held up the sketchbook, her only piece of herself left untouched. Nathan couldn't speak. He wanted to defend himself, to say she misunderstood, but he knew she didn't. Everything she said was true. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with the sound of something cracking the illusion he had built around his heart. Lena turned and started toward the door, but stopped halfway. Without looking back, she said quietly, "You don't have to like me, Nathan. Just don't make me disappear." And then she was gone. Nathan stood there for a long time, staring at the sketches spread across the desk. The faces she'd drawn felt alive, full of warmth he'd never noticed in his own home. He saw himself again, the man behind the glass walls, detached, cold, tired. The truth hit harder than he expected. She hadn't drawn a monster. She had drawn a man who had forgotten how to live. That night, Nathan sat in his office, the sketchbook still open beside him. The house was quiet except for the rhythmic crash of the waves. He looked out the window, past the reflection of his own face, and realized that for the first time in years, he didn't like the man staring back. Days passed after the confrontation in the library, but the air inside Coal Point Estate hadn't recovered. The silence was different now, not cold, but wounded. Nathan tried to focus on work, but his thoughts kept circling back to Lena's words. Every time he saw her sketchbook lying on the desk, he remembered the way she'd looked at him, angry, hurt, and brave all at once. He had built his success by controlling everything, contracts, meetings, numbers, but no contract could make him feel in control of her honesty. Lena, meanwhile, buried herself in her sketches. She ate little, slept less, and spent long hours in the sunroom by the cliffs. The waves kept her company when Nathan couldn't. One evening, the house was unusually quiet. The staff had gone home early because of a power outage warning. Nathan stayed late in his office, the rain outside tapping against the windows. He went looking for Lena when he realized he hadn't seen her since breakfast. The lights were dim in the library. At first, he thought she'd fallen asleep at the desk again. Her head rested against her arm, the sketchbook open in front of her. But as he stepped closer, he noticed something was wrong. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale. "Lena." No response. "Lena." Nathan rushed forward, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. He lifted her carefully from the chair. She felt too light, fragile. Panic hit him hard. "Stay with me," he muttered, his voice trembling. He carried her through the hallway, shouting for help, but only the storm outside answered. The doctor arrived 20 minutes later, soaked from the rain, a small bag in hand. "She's dehydrated, malnourished, and overworked," the doctor said after a quick check. "Stress can do this, Mr. Cole. She needs rest, real rest." Nathan stood by the bed, his throat tight. "Will she be all right?" With care, the doctor replied, "She just needs someone to notice before it happens again." The words stung more than he wanted to admit. When the doctor left, Nathan sat beside her bed, the storm still raging outside. He poured a glass of water and placed it on the nightstand, then noticed the sketchbook lying there. He hesitated, then opened it. More drawings, dozens of them. The waves, the house, the kitchen staff, laughing, even the stray cat that sometimes wandered by the garden. Every page was filled with life, with warmth. And then again, there was him. Not the man in a suit, not the CEO from magazine covers, but a man sitting alone, his head bowed under the glow of his desk lamp. It wasn't a portrait of power, it was a portrait of loneliness. He closed the book slowly, his eyes burning. Hours later, Lena stirred. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I didn't mean to be a burden." Nathan leaned closer, shaking his head. "You're not a burden. You never were." Her eyes fluttered open, confused. "You should rest," he said softly, adjusting the blanket over her shoulders. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, their first real silence that wasn't made of distance. When she drifted back to sleep, Nathan stayed beside her. He didn't touch his phone or check his emails. He simply sat there, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, the storm easing outside. For the first time, the mansion didn't feel like his fortress of control. It felt like a place he'd failed to see, a place that could finally change him. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the air clear and bright. Nathan stood by the window, watching the sunlight break across the cliffs. He had spent his whole life chasing perfection. But as he looked back at Lena resting peacefully, he realized beauty had been sitting across from him, all along, hidden behind patient strength and the courage to endure. And for the first time, Nathan Cole was truly stunned. The days after Lena's collapse moved more gently, like the tide after a storm. Nathan changed first in small ways. He started coming downstairs for breakfast instead of eating in his office. He asked the cook to prepare Lena's favorite meals, though he had to guess what those were. And when they sat across from each other at the long oak table, he didn't hide behind his phone anymore. At first, their conversations were brief, polite questions about the weather, her recovery, or his meetings. But soon, they grew into something else. One morning, Nathan noticed her staring out the window at the cliffs while stirring her tea. "You always draw the ocean," he said. "Why?" Lena smiled faintly. "It doesn't judge. It changes every day, but it's never ashamed of what it becomes." Her words lingered with him long after breakfast. That afternoon, he found himself standing behind her in the sunroom, watching as she sketched the horizon. "You've lived by the sea your whole life," he said quietly. "Doesn't it ever get lonely?" Sometimes she admitted not looking up from her drawing, but loneliness is easier when you make something out of it. Nathan hesitated. "And what have you made out of it?" She looked at him then, not coldly, not kindly, just honestly. "You'll see someday." The moment hung between them, soft and real. Over the next few weeks, their quiet rhythm continued. They took walks along the cliffs when the weather was kind. Nathan, who had once hated slowing down, found peace in those wordless strolls. Sometimes he'd catch her smiling at the sky for no reason and wonder when he'd last done that himself. He even began to notice the smallest things, how the light in the house shifted, depending on the hour, how laughter from the staff sounded lighter when Lena was around, how the smell of her coffee lingered in the hall long after she'd gone. One evening, he came home late from a business trip. The house was dark except for the light spilling from the sunroom. He followed it quietly and found Lena asleep on the couch, her sketchbook resting open on her chest. He picked it up carefully. On the page was a drawing of the two of them sitting side by side at the breakfast table, not smiling, just existing together. But there was warmth in it, a stillness that said more than words could. Nathan stood there for a long time, the sound of the waves below blending with the quiet hum of the night. He realized that the silence between them had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It had become a kind of peace, something safe, something healing. Before turning off the lamp, he covered her with a blanket and whispered almost to himself, "Thank you." He didn't know exactly what, for her patience, her presence, or the way she'd managed to bring color back into a house that had been gray for so long. Outside, the moonlight shimmered over the ocean, soft and forgiving. Inside, for the first time, the Cole mansion didn't feel like a cage of glass. It felt like home. By late spring, peace had finally found its way into Cole Point Estate. The walls that once echoed with silence now carried traces of conversation, laughter, and the soft sound of pencil on paper. Nathan had changed subtly, but completely. He still worked long hours, but he came home early whenever he could. He and Lena often ate dinner together on the terrace, the ocean breeze carrying their quiet smiles across the table. He hadn't said the words aloud yet, but everyone in the house could feel it. He was falling in love with her. But peace, as life often proved, is fragile. It was a Friday evening when the first cracks appeared. Nathan's stepmother, Vivian Cole, had arrived unexpectedly from Seattle. Elegant, sharp-eyed, and always in control, she carried herself like someone who had never known doubt. Nathan greeted her with the warmth of obligation, not affection. Vivian had built her life around appearances just like he once had. At dinner, Vivian studied Lena across the table, her fork pausing mid-air. "You've grown comfortable here," she said, smiling thinly. "Quite an upgrade from your father's workshop, I imagine." Lena kept her voice calm. "It's different, yes." Vivian tilted her head. "I suppose everyone has their own definition of love." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Mother, that's enough." But she only smiled wider. "I'm simply saying one should be honest about what brought them here." The tension lingered through dessert. Later that night, Nathan apologized to Lena, who brushed it off gently, though her hands trembled when she thought he wasn't looking. 2 days later, the storm came not from the ocean, but from Vivian. That Sunday morning, the headlines hit every business page in Oregon. Coal marriage, a contract sources claim deal behind wedding. The article described everything: the one-year agreement, the financial terms, even hints about Lena's father's debts. It was brutal, invasive, and true. Lena found out before Nathan did. She was in the garden when one of the maids handed her the paper, eyes full of pity. Her hands shook as she read the words. She didn't cry. She just stood there, the sound of the waves roaring faintly behind her. By the time Nathan returned from his meeting, reporters were already gathered outside the estate gates. His phone buzzed with messages, his name trending online. He stormed inside furious until he saw her. Lena stood in the foyer holding the newspaper like a wound she couldn't hide. "Who did this?" she asked quietly. He froze. "Lena, was it your mother?" He hesitated, and that was enough. The silence between them answered for him. She nodded slowly, her voice breaking for the first time. "So it was never over, was it? The deal. The pretending. It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," she cried. "Tell me this whole house isn't built on lies." Nathan reached for her, but she stepped back. "I thought maybe," she whispered, "for once in my life, someone saw me. Not because of money, not because of pity, but because of me." Her eyes glistened not from tears, but from something deeper: betrayal. He opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. Lena turned away. "You can tell your mother she got what she wanted. I'm leaving." Within the hour, her things were packed into a small suitcase, the same one she'd arrived with. She left the sketchbook on the table, open to a page she had drawn only days earlier, the two of them sitting at dinner, laughing under string lights. Nathan found it after she was gone. Outside, the cameras flashed as she walked past the gate, her head held high despite the noise. The reporters called her name, their voices sharp, hungry for reaction. She gave them none. Inside the mansion, Nathan stood by the window, staring at the empty driveway. The house felt bigger than ever, the silence now heavier than before. He'd spent years mastering business power and control, but in one careless moment, he'd lost the only thing that had ever made any of it mean something. The ocean crashed harder against the rocks below, as if trying to warn him that love once taken for granted doesn't wait to be rescued. By dawn, the next morning, Coal Point Estate felt like a shell, grand, silent, and hollow. Nathan hadn't slept. He had spent the entire night reading the newspaper headline again and again, hoping the words would somehow change. But they didn't. The truth stared back at him. The marriage contract, the exposure, the humiliation. He tried calling Lena, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Her things were gone except for one, the sketchbook she had left behind, still open on the kitchen table. He sat there for hours, tracing the faint pencil lines with his thumb. In her drawings, she had seen him as human, even when he hadn't deserved it. Now that Grace was gone, the staff moved quietly around him, whispering as if a funeral had taken place. In a way, one had. When his stepmother Vivian entered the room, he didn't look up. "You did this," he said flatly. Vivian folded her hands, her expression calm. "It was bound to come out, Nathan. Better now than later." Better for who his voice was sharp, now breaking through the quiet. For you. For your reputation. She blinked unbothered. For the family name. Nathan stood, eyes burning. "You destroyed the only good thing that ever walked into this house." Vivian's face hardened. She never belonged here. He stared at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Neither do you." He turned and walked out, leaving her speechless. By the time he reached the coast road, the morning fog had thickened. He drove for hours, following a lead from the gardener who'd seen Lena leave the night before. She was heading south toward Brookings, the small town where her father's old workshop still stood near the harbor. The radio buzzed with noise reporters discussing the scandal at Coal Point. Every word was a knife. He turned it off and drove faster. When he reached the train station near the Oregon-California line, the parking lot was crowded with photographers. He recognized her immediately standing by the platform with her suitcase, her hair swept by the wind. For a moment, he just watched her frozen. The flashes from the cameras lit up her face, and all he could think about was how she had never looked more peaceful, even in heartbreak. Then someone shouted his name. Nathan Cole. Is it true the marriage was a contract? The crowd turned. Microphones and phones pointed at him like weapons. He could have walked away. He could have stayed silent like he always had. Instead, he stepped forward. Yeah, he said loudly, his voice steady. There was a contract. The crowd gasped. But what started on paper, he continued, doesn't end that way. He looked at Lena now, his voice lowering but still strong enough for everyone to hear. I married her because it was convenient. I thought I was doing her a favor. I thought love was a business decision. He paused, emotion breaking through the calm. But she's the one who taught me what love actually is. She showed me what it means to see someone really see them when the rest of the world refuses to. The questions came all at once. Are you saying you love her? Nathan didn't hesitate. Yes, he said, eyes still on Lena. I love her. I love the woman you called plain, the one you judged because she didn't sparkle like your parties. She's the strongest, kindest person I've ever met, and I'm done pretending she's anything less. The crowd fell silent. Even the sea beyond the platform seemed to pause. He stepped closer to her. Lena, I know I can't ask you to forgive me, but if you walk away, I'll understand. Just know that for the first time in my life, I mean every word I say. She stood motionless, tears pooling in her eyes but never falling. Nathan, he shook his head. You don't owe me anything. I just needed the world to know the truth and for you to hear it from me, not them. The train horn echoed across the platform. The air smelled of rain and salt. Lena's suitcase trembled in her hand. She looked at him, the man who once couldn't see past appearances, now standing vulnerable before the world. For a moment, neither moved. Then she took a slow step toward him. Reporters surged forward, flashes lighting up the gray morning, but Lena didn't care. She stopped just in front of him, voice trembling. You should have told me sooner. I know, he said softly. I should have done a lot of things sooner. The train doors opened behind her, but she didn't board. Instead, she looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, Nathan felt seen, not as a millionaire or a headline, but as a man stripped bare by truth. He whispered, even if you still leave, I'll never stop being grateful for you. Lena hesitated, her gaze softening. Then prove it, Nathan. Not with money, with how you live. And with that, she turned, stepping onto the train as the doors closed behind her. Nathan stood on the platform surrounded by noise, cameras, and chaos. Yet somehow, everything went silent. He watched the train disappear into the mist, his heart both breaking and mending at once. He had lost her, but in that loss, he had found the part of himself he thought money could buy, the part that could finally love honestly. As the reporters called his name again, he didn't answer. He just looked out toward the sea, breathing in the cold air, whispering to no one but the wind. She taught me how to see. 6 months passed. Summer came quietly to the Oregon coast, softening the cliffs that once looked so harsh against the sea. The newspapers had moved on to new scandals, new names. But for Nathan Cole, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was rebuilding him piece by piece. He had sold half his company's shares, stepped away from the board, and spent his days working with local housing projects along the coast, real homes for real families, not glass towers for headlines. It wasn't charity, it was redemption. Every morning he still drove past the old Brookings train station, hoping he might see her again. He never did. Then, one late afternoon, while visiting a community art fair downtown, he noticed a small crowd gathered near a whitewashed building by the harbor. A wooden sign hung over the door. Heartlight Studio. The name hit him like a heartbeat. Inside, the walls were lined with sketches and paintings of the Oregon coast waves breaking under sunlight, children playing by the docks, an old man fixing a fishing net. The colors felt alive, full of warmth and truth. And then he saw her. Lena stood near the back of the room, talking softly with a group of students. Her hair was shorter now, her expression calm, radiant, in a way he'd never seen before. She laughed easily, something she hadn't done much when she lived in his house. For a moment, Nathan couldn't move. The world around him blurred until there was only her and the sound of waves outside. When she finally noticed him, her smile faded just slightly, not from anger, but from surprise. He took a slow step forward. You opened it, he said quietly, nodding toward the sign. Heartlight. She nodded. It's what my father always said light could do, find its way through cracks. He smiled faintly. It suits you. There was a pause, gentle but full. I heard about what you've been doing, she said. Building homes for families. That's different for you. It's something you taught me, he replied, that not everything real has to shine. Lena looked down her fingers, brushing a sketch on the table. You didn't come here for a painting, did you? Nathan shook his head. No, I came to say thank you for saving me from myself. Her eyes softened. You didn't need saving, Nathan. You just needed to stop hiding. He smiled, but there was sadness in it too. You were right about the ocean. It doesn't judge. It just keeps moving. She studied him for a long time, then said quietly, So should we. He nodded, accepting the truth in her words. Before leaving, he reached into his coat and placed something on her table, a small framed copy of one of her sketches, the one she had left behind months ago. Two people sitting at dinner, a string of lights above them, laughter frozen in pencil. I kept it, he said, because it reminded me who I was with you. Lena looked at the drawing, then back at him. Keep it this time for who you've become. He smiled one last time and stepped toward the door. Outside, the sunlight spilled through the windows, washing over her canvases in gold. He turned back for a moment and saw her standing there, strong, peaceful, surrounded by color. For the first time, Nathan didn't feel regret, only gratitude. He walked toward his car, the sea breeze lifting the corners of his coat. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, and the sound mixed with the rhythm of the waves. Some stories don't end with a kiss. Some end with understanding. And that he realized was love too. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more cinematic love stories that remind us that sometimes the most beautiful things aren't seen at first glance.